Hello, my name is Filippos Filippidis and I'm a senior lecturer in public health at Imperial College London. I am also a member of the Tobacco Control Committee of the European Respiratory Society. This year, the World Health Organization has selected nicotine, youth and tobacco industry interference as the topic of the World No Tobacco Day. I will discuss some of the issues that are relevant to that topic by describing the regulatory framework for tobacco and youth in Europe and globally. Then I will discuss the key commitments that European countries have made in terms of protecting youth from tobacco. I will highlight some examples of effective policies to protect youth, but also I will present some of the tobacco industry tactics that are aiming to undermine those policies. Finally, I will suggest what we can do as a community to battle against those tobacco industry tactics. I will start by showing this graph. And what this graph shows is that most of the smokers in Europe have started smoking regularly before the age of 18. That means when they were still adolescents. And of course, this is something that we as a tobacco control community have noticed, but long before us, the tobacco industry has noticed as well. In the words of Philip Morris, which is one of the biggest international tobacco companies, the ability to attract new smokers and develop them into a young adult franchise is key to brand development. And there are many other quotes like that in tobacco industry documents. They're clearly targeting the new generation so that they can keep their clientele as some smokers quit or many of them die as they get older. The WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control is the main legal document that guides governments around the world in terms of tobacco control. It has been ratified by the majority of countries in the world, with some notable exceptions, of course, and it has a number of articles which give guidance to the countries that have ratified it regarding the policies and the measures they need to take in order to protect their populations from tobacco. There's a specific article, Article 16, that highlights the main policies to protect young people. And this is exactly because the WHO knows how important young people are for the tobacco industry. Article 16 prohibits the sales to persons under a certain age. Of course, it suggests this should happen in every country, but as we'll see later on, this doesn't necessarily mean that this has been implemented in every country that has ratified the FCTC. Another thing that is prohibited by Article 16 is to make available toys, sweets, and other forms of products that resemble or have the taste of tobacco products, which is clearly a way to attract young users. Access of minors to vending machines should also be prohibited, and tobacco companies should not be allowed to give away free tobacco products. Finally, individual cigarettes or small packs should not be sold, as they are more accessible and have lower cost. So young users could be more likely to start smoking or using tobacco products if they are cheap and sold as individual sticks. Of course, Article 16 is one of the many articles of FCTC, and there are many others that include policies that are clearly relevant to young people. Such policies include bans on advertising and promotion, taxation of tobacco products, measures against illicit trade, packaging and labeling, and education campaigns. All these either help young people to avoid tobacco when they are still 15, 16, 18, 20 years old, but also they help them indirectly. For example, we know that young people are more likely to start smoking if they have friends and family who are smokers. By reducing the prevalence of smoking in a country, which is something that many of those policies can achieve, then you reduce the chances that a young person will be influenced by their environment to start smoking. So this is really important. Having said that, although the majority of the countries that have ratified the FCTC have implemented at least some of the policies in Article 16, we see it's about 80% regarding cigarettes and 67% for smokeless tobacco. Only a small minority of them have really implemented the full range of policies described in that article. Only 12% globally in 2018. This is of course unfortunate, but if we talk about Europe, we will find that some, at least of those countries that have implemented the full range of policies are in Europe. And the reason is that the European Union is also covered by the EU Tobacco Products Directive, which was formally implemented in 2016 and includes many of the same articles, not the same articles, but same policies in different form and wording as the FCTC. And the TPD, as we call it, the Tobacco Products Directive, is very specific in its aims. So, for example, there is some text in the beginning of the TPD that says health protection should be given high importance, in particular to reduce smoking prevalence among young people. So young people is one of the main targets of the TPD, and rightly so. There are many different policies that, as I've already mentioned, can affect young people. And in the TPD, young people are explicitly mentioned in quite a few places. For example, member states should be encouraged to prevent sales to children and adolescents by adopting age limits. And I have to say that compared to the FCTC, the TPD is easier to enforce within the EU because there are 27 countries compared to 180 that have ratified FCTC. And these regulations have been developed through an agreement of all member states. Things are not perfect, but at least this is a good document to start with. Also, the TPD includes regulations regarding packaging, because it is recognized that packaging can mislead consumers, in particular young people, to think that the product is less harmful. Member states should also be allowed to prohibit cross-border distance sales, which is really important in a place like the European Union, where borders are not as strong and restrictive as in other places in the world. And although e-cigarette regulations are not very strict in the TPD, there's quite a bit of leeway given in each individual member state. The TPD does say that countries within the EU should be mindful of the potential attractiveness of such products, flavored e-cigarettes, that means, for young people and non-smokers. And we should be clear, I mean, the TPD is clear that the countries should be advising against e-cigarettes for young people. Many of those policies have been tried out, and we know that they work. I won't give an exhaustive list of those policies and particular examples, but I will mention a couple just to give you a flavor of what can be done. For example, raising the legal age to purchase tobacco works, and we've seen that in many countries. In the UK, for example, the legal age, that means the age under which you are not allowed to buy tobacco, was raised from the age of 16 to 18 in 2007. And we've seen that right after the legislation was implemented, young people were less likely to become smokers quite quickly. And this was across all socioeconomic levels, which is what this graph shows. More recently, in the US, certain states increased the legal age from 18 to 21. And this is something that is being discussed in the UK and in other countries as well. And what we've seen is that in the US, in places where there was a higher age limit, it was less likely for young people to become smokers. There was a 3% roughly reduction in the probability of being a current smoker in those places that had a higher age limit, which doesn't sound huge, but it is significant and it can have a big public health impact. Something else that we know works really well is tobacco taxation. So if you increase taxes, then fewer people become smokers, and this is particularly important for younger people. If it is very expensive to start smoking, there is the motivation to start smoking is much quicker, and we've seen that work time and time again. This is an example from again the US, which shows that increasing cigarette tax and cigarette prices reduces the probability of adolescents to become smokers. Of course, the tobacco industry will not stop because we have thought of policies to restrict their access to young potential users. They have a range of strategies, legal and borderline legal, to influence young people. For example, they introduce flavors that are attractive to youth, not only in tobacco, but especially in nicotine products, which is something that we see more and more with e-cigarettes, for example. They use sleek designs, attractive products that are easy to carry. They have this gadget-like feel, which is attractive for young people. They keep promoting reduced harm products, or I would say so-called reduced harm products. The evidence is weak that these products actually are less harmful than combustible cigarettes, and we've seen time and time again in the past the tobacco industry has produced products they said they are less harmful, slim, light, filtered cigarettes, and we've just seen that they are at least as bad as the previous version of cigarettes. They also use celebrity and influencer sponsorships to promote tobacco and nicotine, and I'll come back to that. Point of sale marketing, when they sell tobacco products. In many countries, there are exceptions that allow them to advertise within those locations, and so when children go there, they are exposed to this advertising. In some places, not in Europe because it's not allowed, but they keep selling single stick cigarettes and other nicotine products near schools so that they are affordable for young people. They do a lot of indirect marketing in movies, TV, online streaming shows, and I'll also come back to that. They have tobacco vending machines at venues frequented by young people, at least in countries where this is allowed, so children could have access to that. And it also serves as a marketing outlet. And of course, they use litigation to weaken all kinds of tobacco control regulations. Many governments, whenever they try to introduce any policy, they are faced with an army of lawyers from the tobacco industry who are trying to stop or delay those measures. Brief example, smoking in movies. We have evidence that exposure to on-screen smoking causes young people to start smoking, and it's a key promotional avenue for tobacco companies. A modeling study predicted that if we could restrict smoking in youth-rated films, we could reduce teen smokers by 18%, which is huge, but still 40% of the movies that are deemed suitable for people above the age of 13, so that means adolescents, they feature smoking, and that results in billions of audience tobacco impressions delivered by youth-rated films every year. And a recent development is that now they create movies based on true events, therefore they have an excuse of showing people who smoke. But then when you look into that, you find that these are mostly fictional characters who smoke, so there was no fun reason why they should smoke. Instagram is a key outlet for e-cigarette companies and the tobacco industry, which produces e-cigarettes. And the little yellow dot in there is the number of posts in the study that had the hashtag the real cost, which was a public health campaign. Instagram is dominated by posts on promotions and flavors, etc. And it's clear that the imagery used does not target smokers who would like to quit, but rather young people who might find this attractive. And we've also shown that the tobacco industry manipulates prices. Whenever there's an increase in taxation, they would absorb some of the increase by reducing their net revenue for cheap cigarettes, but not for expensive cigarettes. Therefore, they clearly aim to have cheap cigarettes in the market so that they can reach young people who don't have a lot of disposable income. So what can we do? Of course, we have the Empower policies that WHO and the FCTC suggest, and we know they're quite effective, and these are also included in the TPD more or less. So taxation, smoking bans, advertising and promotion bans, age restrictions in purchasing tobacco, reducing illicit trade, and education campaigns. All these can be quite effective, and they could greatly reduce the penetration of the tobacco industry among youth. However, things are changing. Some of those documents are relatively old, so there are new products in the market, new strategies. We have to make sure that we eliminate cheap tobacco by adopting more sophisticated taxation structures so that companies cannot have cheap cigarettes in the market. We should address online cross-border marketing, the Instagram problem that I've mentioned earlier. I think we should be aiming to increase legal age of purchase to 21, as we've seen it works for young people. We should be very careful in terms of flavors, especially in e-cigarettes. They seem to be out of control. There are thousands of flavors out there. We don't know what they contain exactly, how dangerous this may be, but they are also clearly attractive for young people. And we should tackle all those novel reduced risk products. Finally, plain packaging is also a good tool. It's not included in the TPD, but many European countries have already adopted that, and many more will follow, I'm sure. This is my last slide. This is one of the posters that the World Health Organization has developed for this year's World Non-Tobacco Day. I think we all agree, I guess, that protecting our children, the young generation, from the tobacco industry influence is one of the best investments we can make for the future of our society. So thank you very much, and I wish you a happy World Non-Tobacco Day 2020.